Hello guys, Dan here. In this video I'm going to show you how to paint the small figures that come with your model kits. Now typically these figures are included with master grades, perfect grades, and real grade model kits. In front of you is a master grade scale figure. This is from the master grade unicorn, and in this video I'm going to show you how to paint this guy here, who's a generic Zeon pilot. So as you can tell, he's a fairly small guy. There's one of my fingers in comparison to him. So how do we paint something so small? Well, that's what we're going to learn how to do in this video. Stay tuned. Okay, so we have the figure that we want to paint. The question is, what are his colors? What's our reference material? Now, some cases you may not necessarily have a manual for your kits, so this is just a general reminder that we have two great resources on our hands. They are Mech9 and Dalong. So first, Dalong.net. This is a privately run site by an individual who really loves Gundam, and you can find just about any kit that Bandai has released on this website. And along with that, you can find photos of the manuals as well as all the parts they include. So for this example, the kit we're using is the Master Grade White Ogre, which is a 2.0 Zaku. And if we go to information here, we can go right down to the manual, and we can find the color guide. And a nice high resolution picture of the figure in question. So, one problem with this is the text is in Japanese. Now, of course, you can use an application on your phone to translate that text, but, yeah, sometimes we're lazy, and that's fine. So we're going to look at the second resource that we have, which is Mech9. And this is mech9.com, and this is a website that includes many translations of the different color guides and manuals that Bandai releases. They don't have everything, and they don't actually have a Zaku 2.0, but we can actually look and let's just choose an example here. This is the Zaku 2.0, but this is the Black Tri-Stars, and I know that their figures are painted differently. But we can still come down here and see how the figures are painted. So keep these two websites in your favorites bar. I think you'll get a lot of use out of them. Now, for this example, I actually have the manual, so I don't need to use either resource. So I know what we need to paint our figure. So as we can see here, it's basically mostly two green colors, right? A very light green for the feet and hands and some of the body work, and then a also light green, but slightly darker green for the body here. Now, my recommendation whenever you're painting a figure is always base coat your figure in the lightest color that you have on the figure. So for example, with Banagher here, he was base coated with white, and then I just detail painted all the other little colors on him. That's typically the easiest way of getting your figure started. I'm going to be base coating this little Zeon guy with lacquer-based paints. You can do it with acrylic or whatever you have. Basically, what you can't do is paint over the base coat with a type of paint that is going to use a solvent that will disrupt the base coat. So if you base coat with acrylic and then for some reason you decide I'm going to hand paint lacquer on it, which is a terrible idea. But for this example, the lacquer solvent will just tear the base coat paint right up. So don't do that. One thing you need to be very careful of as you're prepping your figure is a lot of these guys, due to the way they're molded, they have flashing all down the sides of them. It's really important to clean that up. And the best way to clean up flashing on such a small figure is basically just take your hobby knife and just give it a couple quick light scrapes like this. Not too rough, just enough to remove the flashing lines. Also, you obviously want to clean up all your little nubs. As I stare at this thing off camera, he actually looks pretty good. There's still a little bit of flashing on his helmet, but for the most part, he's in pretty good shape. So what I'm going to do off camera now is go take him over to the spray booth and give him a good coat of white paint, and I'll be back with you guys in a couple of minutes. Actually, I'm not going to base coat him in white. I'm going to base coat him in this really light green color. Alright? I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Okay guys, I'm back from base coating the figurine now. So as we can see, he is now a very light shade of green, very, very light as a matter of fact. When I am painting my figures, especially airbrushing them, I like to secure them to something that is nice and flat. It gives them something to stand on, for lack of a better term. If you try putting them up on a skewer, they tend to go flying off and disappear. So in this case, I'm using an old paint tray that's just secured on with a little bit of masking tape. Now, when I base coated this figure, I didn't use any primer, which is not something I normally recommend. However, due to the very fine details of this figurine, it makes sense to preserve as much as you can by not filling it up with primer that you don't really need, because after all, this figurine is probably going to get glued somewhere and never move, so his paint shouldn't really chafe off. So we're going to let this guy cure for a couple of minutes, and then when we come back, we're going to start painting the details. Okay guys, we're ready to get on to the meat of the tutorial here, where we're going to start hand brushing our figure. So let's move him back in. First things first, we need to pick a good brush. In this example here, this flat brush is too large for the figure, I'd say, so we're going to have to wind up using the small round brush. This is a, I don't even know what size it is. It's not printed on the handle, unfortunately. And we're going to be mixing up our paints. Now, for the hand brushing, I will be using some Vallejo colors here. I actually don't have green, so we're going to be mixing some up. And then we're going to apply it to the figure and probably let that dry. And then we'll come back and paint some other colors. So, when you're hand brushing, it's important to remember you don't necessarily need to fully cover the figure with your first application of paint. You can always come back and apply extra coats as needed. In fact, it's a good idea that you don't go too heavy. Just like when you're airbrushing, you want to have a light coat. You want to be able to start seeing some of the color present on the kit, but you don't want to just glob it on there, because when that dries it looks terrible. Alright, that is clearly too blue. I'm probably going to wind up wasting more paint here than I really need to. The reality is it doesn't hurt to have a good range of colors on hand. And if I had a basic green color here, instead of mixing this blue and yellow, I'd probably come up with a suitable color much more easily than just trying to go back and forth here. But this is my basic process for mixing paint. I use these little paint trays. You can get these from most model shops. They're cheap. They are disposable. I feel bad about throwing them away, but if you have to get rid of them, it's not the end of the world. That's an okay looking green, but we need something that's a little bit lighter. You see that's pretty saturated. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some white here and start dropping it in. Another thing about hand painting is you need to thin your paint. And with Vallejo, the nice thing about these paints is you can thin it with water. So it's very easy to control how thick or thin your paint is. And over time, of course, as you're painting with this stuff, the water will evaporate. So occasionally you do need to add a little bit more. I keep it's actually a spray bottle. Whoop. Geez, sorry about that, guys. I keep a spray bottle on hand full of distilled water. I use distilled because the water in my region is fairly mineralized, and I don't want any of that to interfere with the finished product, with my paint's finished product. So keep that in mind. Let's see here. It's lighter. It's definitely lighter, but there's still some green that's not quite mixed in. And you can see I just dabbed a tiny little bit right on that color. Well, it's not 100%. It's pretty close, so we're going to go with that there. And the way I like to do this, basically, is I like to apply color to basically wherever it goes on the kit. Let it dry completely, then come back and do another color and another color and another color until we do everything. I am going to just spritz the tip of my brush a little bit just to get it a little wet. And then I'm going to come down here and start picking up some paint. It's important that we don't, you never want to go straight down with your brush into your palette, because that's how you ruin the tip of your brush, but you want to kind of pull back and rotate when you load up paint onto your brush, and then just come over to the kit and just start painting it on. Take it nice and easy and go slow, no rush. You can see these two green colors are not all that far apart, and that may change as it dries because that does happen. If that is the case and it darkens up a little bit, great. If not, we may come back and maybe add a tinge more blue to the mix just to darken it a little bit. Just go over the kit slowly and surely. Of course, when you're not painting around other colors like those boots or this stripe and belt going down the kit, you can be a little more aggressive, a little faster, but we don't want to rush and ruin our base coat. We're not globbing the paint on. We're moving it around. We're making sure we're covering everything because we don't want our base color to poke through in the areas where it doesn't belong. Now there are some techniques that you can use to maybe pull out a little more detail on the kit, and that's basically shading. The easiest way for you to do that is when you're base coating, before you paint your primary base coat color, just take some black paint and squirt it up from the base of your kit, from like the lowest angle you can possibly get, and it creates kind of like a shadow effect. That when you base coat it, you'll have some areas that would, naturally be in shadow that are slightly darker than those that would be exposed to light. So it can enhance the overall aesthetic of your kit a little bit. And I did that in the Ben Azure kit, and I'll show that in a couple of minutes when we move on. But for now, with this kit, I just wanted something really basic, a really clean paint scheme. Just taking our time and moving up the body. Now, it's debatable with this figure. We probably could have gotten away with painting the body color as our base coat, and then hand brushing on the lighter color for the boots and gloves and the stripe on the chest. But generally, when I paint these figures, I like to base coat with the lightest color of the kit. And that's just because when I'm hand brushing, I don't want to have to do a gazillion layers to cover the other colors present on the model. And those light colors can definitely be affected by whatever the base coat is. Okay, so that's the bottom half of him. Neaten that up a little bit. I think I missed a little dot in there. And we'll move on to the chest. And if we look at the example image here, we can see that this kind of chest protector up here is that lighter color, so we're going to very carefully paint around it. Same thing with the stripe in the center of the chest and the belt. don't be afraid as you're painting. You don't need to just move your brush. Sometimes you can get away with moving the figure, because you're going to have to attack the figure from a couple different directions to make sure you get everything, get in all the crevices, under his arms, in between his arms and his chest, between his legs. Now, the backpack here does need to be painted a different color, and it's going to be a darker color, like a kind of a medium gray. So if I happen to get some green paint on the backpack, it's not the end of the world. That green paint will, or the gray paint of the backpack will easily cover up this light green color. Now, a couple advice or tips if you're not used to hand brushing are make sure that you brace your arms on the table. We're trying to limit as much movement as we possibly can so we don't accidentally jerk our hand and paint the wrong thing. Similarly, try to brace the figure against whatever your work surface is. So for example, I have this dish kind of sandwiched right on the table to prevent it from going anywhere. And while the figure is moving slightly as I paint him, I'm trying to be as delicate as I can so I don't accidentally jolt him and either knock him off of his base or paint the wrong area. Okay, let's get the outside of this arm. And I realize I think these stripes on the shoulders and the arms and the legs probably should have been that lighter color. It's kind of hard to tell on the figure. I'm not going to worry about it now because they're already painted over. But if I were painting a bunch of these, that's probably something I would try to avoid painting in future models. Alright, I think I'm going to go back here and check my work really quickly. I think we just about got this guy covered. Now this Vallejo paint, because it's water-based, it tends to dry pretty quickly. So we can come back here and kind of start our second coat very quickly if we've missed anything. I think that just about does it. Looks like his helmet is that same light color as his boots, gloves, and other equipment. So I think we are set. Okay, I think that's going to do it for the body color right there. As I go in here and touch it back up again. Okay, so I'm going to let that color dry. And here's a quick tip about brush care. If you want to keep your brushes lasting in good condition longer, it's important to clean them right as you're done using them. So this is my little brush pot here. And this is filled with rubbing alcohol, which will break this paint up nice and easily. And I'm just going to clean the brush until no more paint comes off of it. And at that point I'll cap my brush off to make sure the bristles don't get bent, and I'll have it ready for the next color when we get to the next step. Alright guys, so for this section of the video I'm actually doing a voiceover. For whatever reason we didn't record audio in the last part, so this is going to be the part of the video where I detail paint the figure. I've mixed up a little bit of neutral gray, some blue, and some red to paint some of the details on this kit. When I paint details on a model, I like to work from the deepest parts of the kit, i.e. the recessed parts, and I work out to the more superficial areas, or the raised areas. The reason for this is the more superficial areas, if I get paint from a recessed area on it, I can always go over it and touch it up. And it's a way for me to keep track of what I have and haven't painted. So it's part organizational method, part it's just easier to do touch-ups if I need to. I started with the visor because that's the deepest part of the kit, and then I moved on to the red crest that sits just over the helmet. The trick for doing the small red crest is basically just follow the raised detail. Let the brush pick up the edges of the part and just kind of work it in gently. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort to get it, just pretty much let the brush do the hard part. Following that, I flipped the little model around and started painting the backpack. It's also a raised area. It's very easy to just let the brush pick up the edges and then kind of fill it in. I went slightly off on the right shoulder there, but I figured once we started to give the kit a wash, that would just disappear. After painting everything, I gave it a couple of minutes to cure, because we want to make sure that we have a nice dry surface to apply the wash onto. And that's what we're going to pick up with in the next section of the video. Alright guys, just like the last section, this section is being recorded as voiceover because for some reason that section of the video did not record audio. We're going to be using Vallejo's dark gray vehicle wash for this section of the kit. It's just basically a thin water-based wash that we can apply over the model. And normally this stuff is pretty gunky. It's pretty disgusting stuff when you put it on spacecraft or whatever. So we're going to thin it down with a little bit of water and then generously mix it up with our large flat brush, the brush we decided not to use at the beginning of the video. And it's important to, you know, blend it pretty well, make sure you have all the particulates worked well into the water, and then just apply a little bit to your brush and start working around the model. We want to avoid pooling any of this solution on the model kit. So anywhere where you see a large dark area next to, you know, a less dark, you know, reasonably light area, we want to go back and kind of touch up to make sure that it doesn't pool there and create any weird blotchy spots on the kit. You're going to see me at points just kind of take the tip of my brush and touch it to some of these dark areas and then blot it off on a tissue. That's just a good way of pulling a tiny little bit of the solution off. And this is the, at this step, when we're starting to wash the kit, you want to take this in stages, because we can always apply more wash, but you can't really take it away. So, you know, apply a little bit, let it dry on the kit. If it doesn't look dark enough, go back and apply a little bit more, and basically work at it gradually until it reaches the saturation that you want it to. At the end of the video, you're going to see the little figure just kind of flops off my plate. That does happen. It's important though when you're dealing with washes, you don't want to actually touch the model kit while the wash is drying, because the oils from your hand will actually leave little fingerprints on the guy. So just, you know, if that happens, you know, pick up a pair of tweezers, or like I did here with the toothpick, just pick the model up and set it aside and allow it to dry. Again, don't worry about it too much. When we come back, we're going to look at the final model, and we'll see you then. Alright guys, so after all of that work, we finally have our finished figure. He's been washed, he's been painted, he's been base coated, and he's been detail painted. So here he is. Not too bad looking. Now keep in mind, it's not perfect, nor does it really need to be. This guy is so small that, you know, it's pretty hard to pick out any little mistakes that went on here. But I think he looks pretty good. So, just to review the process that we followed, we base coated our figure with the lightest color that was present on the figure's model. Then we hand painted all of the other details, giving it plenty of time to dry in between each color. And then we finished the kit off with a couple of washes to bring out some of the detail on the model. It's a very simple process. It doesn't take very long because the figure is pretty small, and the results are pretty good looking. This is a great way to spice up any finished kit that you have, or make a diorama, or just have the mobile suit holding the little guy in his hand. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, guys. If this is something that you like, I'll try to make more of them. Till next time, Dan out. Take care.